Ooh.
Going up very quickly.
Yeah, hi everybody.
Oh my God.
I'm just to those who are joining us, the attendees there, we're just going to pause for a couple of seconds while we wait for everyone to join, and then we'll get started.
This is a lot. 502, 6, 7.
It's a lot.
Jesus. Ooh. When I feel like Mick Jagger.
Yeah. You don't look like
Good moves.
I didn't take enough drugs.
I think we can make a start. We've got over 500 with us, a few people still coming in, but let's make a start. Hi everyone, my name's Gary Broughton from Spotlight. Welcome to our webinar, which today focuses on casting practices around the world and helping you to understand more about the similarities and the differences. We're very pleased you're able to join us. We've got an amazing panel for today's session who between them have experience on a broad range of high profile projects made throughout Europe, the US and the UK, and they also hold senior positions in their professional associations. So thanks to our panelists for being with us. Let me briefly introduce them to you. Nathalie Chiron is a casting director based in Paris. She combines prolific work on French language films with major international titles and has worked with some of Europe's most respected directors. Nathalie is a member of the International Casting Directors Network and is president of the French Casting Directors Association, ARDA. Victor Jenkins is based in London and in a career spanning 17 years has cast numerous acclaimed film and TV projects. Alongside his solo work, he works in partnership with Andy Brierley as the Casting Office Limited. Victor is chair of the UK's Casting Directors Guild and a member of the Casting Society of America. Beatrice Kruger founded FBI Casting in Rome in 1992 and has cast Italian and international films ever since. She speaks 5 languages and has travelled throughout Europe as a theatre actress in the 70s and 80s. Beatrice is one of the founders and the president of the first Italian Casting Directors Association. She's a member of the Casting Society of America and a founding member and former board president of the International Casting Directors Network. Finally, Rich Mento is a casting director and producer who has worked in theatre, TV, film and new media in both New York City and Los Angeles. He's also cast music videos, short films, interactive and gaming projects. Rich lives in Los Angeles, from where he's joining us today, and he's currently serving as Vice President of the Casting Society of America. So thanks to those guys, and a big thank you to our British Sign Language interpreters, Joe and Alison. Just before we start, I'd just like to remind you of a couple of ground rules for today's session. Your camera and microphone should be muted automatically. Please check, and if that isn't the case already, please do that now. Secondly, in Zoom, there is a function to ask questions, but please refrain from using that during this session unless the panel requests it. And that's because we've already asked for your questions and received many fascinating questions from you. We'll try our best to get through as many of those as possible during the time we have today. So with that, let's begin. Can I start by asking our panel, each of our panel, to outline how a typical casting project works and how you find actors generally? So, you know, how and when you get involved in a project, the tools you use, and also when your involvement in a project ends. Who can answer first? Victor, would you like to answer first from the UK perspective?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of when we're brought into a project, just quite early on, especially in television more than film, but we start with television. So TV, you are brought on once a production has been greenlit by a network. We'll be brought on often before a director and sometimes for a producer to talk about ideas with the execs. So we get sent the scripts and we work through and we go through the lead roles and we come up with a list of ideas. And that'll be really early on, and then director and producer come on board, and then it's a combination of everyone talking to work out the direction you want to go. In terms of film, it can work in sort of 2 ways. If it's a big studio picture, it comes with someone attached already. So there's a lot of things are in place with it in terms of director, producer, stars there. If it's a independent film, then you start right at the beginning. So often involved in the development process. So we are there, you know, someone will send us a script and we will work with the producer of that script and director to try and get someone attached. And once their name is attached to the script, to the film, they'll get finance off the back of that, and then we can cast the rest of the film. So in independent film, we end up being almost a proto producer at the very beginning, and until it gets going, and then you just do your normal job.
Interesting. Does the same happen for the rest of you guys? I mean, Natalie, how does it work for you?
It's all the same, just on a smaller scale and with French TV and French films. But it's you guys in England and in the States, you have much bigger stuff and more money involved. And so I think it's the same process, but just smaller. I would think, but it's almost the same. I mean, you know, they need stars they need stars to be attached so that they can go and get the money for feature films, even for smaller films. And then TV is a smaller scale also, and we don't have as many broadcasters as you do, guys. So we have like 2 national channels and 1 private, well, TF1 is private, not public.
Yes.
And then Canal Plus, which doesn't do much anymore because it's been bought by a businessman, so he doesn't give a shit about movies anyway. So nothing happens. And then we have Arte, which is a great channel. It's a great broadcaster but it's much smaller on the money side. So, but it's interesting. They have great, interesting projects. So it's just smaller and smaller. So we have less pressure, or it's in a different spot.
Sure, thank you. And Beatrice, does this sound familiar to you?
Yeah, I think it's in proportion, like Natalie said, it's very similar. I mean, there's a difference, absolutely. I do more films than TV, but even so, TV, whether I do it in Italy or in Germany, or, you know, I'm asked to do some stuff like, I don't know, Monsters or whatever for America, then it's already all set and I just do certain parts, right? But for the films that I do, very often they're art house films, and then I'm there from the very beginning, before the film is greenlit, you know, to help attach somebody, and then get the film greenlit, and then of course do the rest of the casting. So in fact, we have a 2-phase casting contract that we use for this reason. By the way, just a little short correction. I'm not the president of the Italian Casting Association anymore. I was many years, and I'm not of the ICDN since February. So everything else was right.
Thank you for correcting us. Sorry.
Oh, it's no big deal. I just want to say.
Sure. No, Rich, tell us how things work in the US.
I would say they're very, very similar. I spend most of my business these days is independent film, and so it is a lot of time spent trying to help producers get films up and running and financed. But I'll speak to the second part of your question, which was how do we find actors? Which the answer for me is always any which way I possibly can. You know, a lot of my productions are international, and so I kind of describe my job now as a casting director is to know everyone in the world who is an actor or who may one day want to be an actor, and I'll never be done. And that's the wonderful thing. It's great. It's exciting. But so it's recommendations, it's agents, it's people I've worked with before, it's people I meet on the street, it's theater I go to, it's television and film that I watch, it's people that reach out to me, it's people that I go looking for. It's really any which way you can, because you never, as independent casting directors, you never know what your next project is, and you never know what types of people you're going to need. And so you're constantly, you know, voraciously watching and reading and meeting, because that's what our job is.
Sure. And in terms of the kind of the tools of the trade for you guys and your everyday workflow, do you all use things like breakdowns or casting breakdowns? Do you use self-tapes? Do you search databases of performers?
Yeah, a lot.
Always.
A lot.
Yeah. Beatrice, all of those?
I definitely use Etalent, I definitely use Spotlight, I definitely use Sometimes breakdown services. I definitely use Arda, not Arda,
Danceartistique.com.
Agence Artistique. But also then, for instance, the Spanish, they have a website, which I also use sometimes.
Yeah.
And
And how about self-tapes? Are they a part of your
yeah,
process?
absolutely, absolutely. Self-tapes and a certain type of About Me video that I'm nearly more keen on even. So, you know,
Yeah.
to start to get a personal, also something from the actor, not just the scene, not just the...
Do you routinely request a self-tape then for most of the roles that you cast?
I always tried, well, the thing is this, because when I started 25 years ago, I immediately did Italian. I mean, I've always lived in Italy and immediately did Italian films, but also immediately half of them were also Americans, because I started actually with Americans and then German, being half German. So it was always a mix. It was always at least half of the production's different. And then it's impossible to know, because you're not just focusing on actors of one country, right? So then you can't know all the actors. So I decided very soon to use, you know, these tools, breakdown services and Italenta casting info, because that way it was an occasion for me also to get to know other actors in that specific, you know, with that specific request through their self-tape. And
Yeah.
I've kept with that method because it works for me.
Yeah. Victor, how do you use self-tapes?
Absolutely. I mean, they are obviously right now incredibly important because it's the only way we get to access people. But they're also very informative. And I think there's been a certain amount of negativity around some self-tapes, when actually they are brilliant because they allow more opportunity. You can get more self-tapes than you can do people in a session. And also it means you can access people from all over the world, let alone the country. And they're also, you can get redirected on a self-tape. I think people think they send a self-tape off and it goes into ether and nothing happens. Well, actually, we've worked on shows, and a show that Kelly and I did together, our lead actor ended up being cast from a self-tape. And it's because the first one he did was terrible. So we watched it and went, okay, look, there's something about you that we like. You need to do it like this. We sent the tape in, and that's what they fell in love with.
Well, that's interesting. So you would go back to an actor who's self-tape, you see something in there, but you just think, have another go. It's not a kind of one-time opportunity.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And is this sounding familiar to you, Natalie, as well? Is this how you tend to work?
Well, in France, no. I mean, of course, because it doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's a small country, even though we are a big industry compared to the size of the country. But the only times I ask for a self-tape is when an actor is not in Paris, like if he's playing or shooting in Lyon or Marseille, and I don't want him to take a train and pay a train, or I don't want that. So I will say, well, do a self-tape for the first run, then we'll see. Otherwise, of course, right now with the lockdown, that's the only way to, you know, to see people. But so as I was saying earlier, the French are not totally ready for self-tapes. It took me twice the time, because I got the self-tapes and I had to call every actor to say, okay, it's great, but we will have to do it again because your back is in the window, I can't see you, the phone is too far, I can't hear you if they don't have a camera. And then why don't you sit maybe, and then put your phone on a shelf. If you have books and bookshelves, then put your phone, you know, you have and tell them to name the videos and tell them, it takes an hour with every actor. So it's double the time, you know. Yeah. But then I think that's because they're French. I mean, I've had self-tape from international actors when I work on international projects, and it works perfectly. And agents, like in Scandinavia, I mean, they all have a room in their agency where the actor can do his self-tape with proper, you know, equipment, and the self-tapes come in with the name of the project and the name of the casting director, and it goes, whoa, whoa, you know. I mean, it's very professional. As here, I mean, you know, people will be sitting in their kitchen like I am right now. But it just doesn't work. So I mean, eventually they will learn. And also the big fear here is that producers will say, oh, it's much less work for you because you don't do anything anymore, because you don't have to meet the actors in real life, so then we can pay you less.
Oh, right.
Oh yeah, so of course.
That's awful.
Yeah, so
It is. And Rich, tell us, in the US, I mean, our assumption is that self-tape is an established part of the process throughout. Is that true?
It is. I'm first going to say that I'm keeping myself muted because the gardeners are outside the courtyard where I live, and it's a little wild. But yeah, I will second everything that my colleagues are saying. Self-taping here has been going on for quite a while. I agree with Victor in that it's hopeful that I can watch more self-tapes than I can see people in a day. And so I think it's very beneficial for the actors. The other thing I try to get across to actors when I speak with them is, there is some negativity about not being able to meet the casting director, not being in the room. But ultimately, I like self-tapes because from the actor's perspective, it's the only time the actor is 100% in charge of the performance. Even if they get the job, every other step, the casting director is going to be directing them, the director is going to be directing them, the lighting person is going to tell them where to stand. Like, you never are completely in charge except for that first self-tape. And so I try to use that as an empowering tool to actors to have fun, to make choices, to be bold, to, yes, be comfortable with the material, but enjoy the process, because never, ever again will you be completely in charge.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that's happening here, and I don't know that any of the platforms are quite ready, but some of the casting technology spaces are doing what they're calling virtually live auditions, which is the ability to, with a reader, come into a casting room such as this, and then be put into a room with a director to read. And so it'll be virtually live, and you'll be able to be redirected in real time.
Oh, wow. So that in that instance, there would be three of you in three separate locations collaborating together on a call.
Yes.
The actor, reader, and director.
Yes, and I read with my actor, so I would be reading with the actor, and the director would be able to see and move on. But for the time being, I think self-tapes is definitely the most logical way to move forward, especially these days.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of leads me on to a question I was going to ask a little bit later about the impact of a coronavirus and the situation currently. I mean, I'm guessing that as we come through the coronavirus crisis and social distancing is kind of still with us for a while yet, there's going to be more need to self-tape. Do you guys, what impact do you think coronavirus will have on the casting process and the life of actors in the coming months?
Well, I really think it's a problem, this not being present, not being able to be physically near. I mean, the social distancing, I find it is really difficult.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when I did the callback, when was it, Tuesday? Yeah, I had a callback after self-tapes, and I wanted to be there with the guys. It was the best day in 2 months. Oh, people, human beings. So we can do things. So we were all wearing our masks for rehearsals, and I had to put tape on the floor saying, "Stop, go away." But it was great finally to be with the guys, and I missed it definitely.
Yeah, and we've done some Zoom recalls, as you've done, Rich, in terms of that virtual casting space, and it's great, and you can work with people, but it doesn't replace being in the room with someone, because there's something about what we do as a job and what directors, what actors do, which is so intuitive, and you need that human connection. So I think to get to that, if you're casting a lead role, you can do all this, and that's great. But I think for those really important roles, you need to get an understanding, and the director needs to get an understanding of the actor in the room. That you can't replace that.
Yeah, totally. We had a question from one of our members saying that did you think that filming from home and on phones for actual productions is going to be a reality?
Awful. Awful.
I agree.
Necessary,
Terrible.
Do you think it's going to be necessary?
Hey, I mean, if the second COVID phase happens, I mean, we're like in a in a waiting room at the moment because
But hasn't because here the big daily TV shows, you know, we have dailies, you know, like they're every day.
Yeah.
They're starting again next Monday, shooting. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, same with EastEnders. Our soaps are getting back together again, but
not in
you know,
Italy, I think.
really,
No.
I think that we're having conversations about productions coming back. But you're right. You know, the second spike could happen at any one point, so insurance is going to be a big issue. And I think, you know, if I was a betting man, I'd say that they'll probably let the ones that are mid-production start first before anything new happens.
Yeah.
So then let's get that done. Then they can show that.
Then they
Yeah.
can die. They can die
Then
later.
they can go
and then
exactly. Yeah.
So guys, what would you, let me maybe address this one to Rich. What would your advice be to actors who are kind of, you know, wondering whether there are skills or techniques that they can work on, or ways to be prepared for working in the kind of the post-COVID world? Is there anything that springs to mind?
I mean, the one thing that I would say is always keep in mind that acting and auditioning are two different skills. And auditioning is something that you can get better at. And self-taping is not going to go away. Virtual casting will continue for at least in the short term. And the same way I would ask actors to have a group of friends to help each other,
Yes.
reading and self-taping and recording,
Yeah.
do it virtually. You know, they still be engaged, because, you know, working mostly in independent film, I thought I had 5 solid productions this year. I don't know that any of them will get made. Some of them are weather dependent, some of them were location dependent. And looking at the calendar, we're going to be in June soon. I don't know what that's going to look like.
Yeah.
But I have heard rumblings that some casting directors are going back to work. And so, and as more countries open up for production, then more, you know, as soon as like the first city in somewhere in the middle of the United States opens, like everybody's going to flock to them and shoot there. But it will be, you know, work is going to come back. Like we are humans, we tell stories. And so in the long term, we'll figure it out and we'll be fine. But in the short term, for actors, figure out how to audition in this atmosphere, because it's not going anywhere.
Good advice. We also had a question from a graduate, someone who's graduating this year, saying advice you would give to graduates who are going to enter the jobs market this year and who are going to be looking for their first roles this coming year. I mean, aside from what we've just spoken about, anything else come to mind?
Poor little babies.
I'd say is that it's the you know, from my perspective, in terms of what Spotlight are doing, what the CDG have done with the graduates certainly coming from the UK, and we've had it from internationally, we've had the Australian ones as well. It's actually the best year to graduate, because it's the one time that everyone is watching everything.
You're right.
So, you know, showcases you have, you might get like a handful of people turn up. But this time, everyone's at home, desperate to find new people, and also have time on their hands to look at these things. So all these online showcases, everyone's looking at them. They'll have been seen by more casting directors than any other year before them.
Yeah, good. Yeah, that's a really nice take on things. Tell me, just back to the kind of the subject matter that we're talking today, in terms of the differences in casting and the process in the different countries where you guys operate. Can you think of how things vary particularly?
Well, if I may say, there's one thing which is absolutely different. Is like in Paris, which is not France, but it's pretty representative because that's where actors live. There's between 16,000 to 18,000 actors. And I think you have 70,000 actors on the Spotlight, right? I mean, voila, that's where the difference is also. That's why we do mostly physical casting, and we love physical because there's so much less people on the market. And in the States, I can't even imagine, you know, Rich, how many actors are they? I mean, everybody's an actor in LA plus, you know, I mean, so, you know, I think that's where the difference is probably.
Yeah, Rich, how does that kind of huge scale of the market in the US affect like the process and the actual nuts and bolts of the job?
I mean, for me, it's going back to what Victor was saying. I did a horror film 2 years ago, completely by offers and self tapes, and I watched so many more auditions because of the self tapes than I ever would have been able to see. And so, but going back to the question before, a point that I wanted to make is for actors that are graduating, there's never been a better time to graduate because there's more production, there's more television, there's more stories being told, there's more opportunities to get jobs than I think in years past, and especially in decades past.
Yeah, I can see that. And Beatrice, from your point of view, does this ring true?
Yes, absolutely. What Rich just said, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think that I'd like to emphasize a little bit again this thing about being prepared for an audition and that you can learn to do it and that you should do it, because you, as an actor, are really responsible for that. Nobody can be angry at you, or you don't have to be embarrassed if you don't get to read the script, because usually you never get the script when you do self-tape. So you just have little information, sometimes even just 2 sentences described what the character is. So nobody can make you responsible for seeing a character wrong, right? With the usual little information that you have. But you have to put yourself in a situation, it's more psychology maybe, where you feel, where you are safe, where you are secure of yourself. And I find that a lot of actors, and also very well-known famous actors who, for instance, detest doing self-tape, detest even coming to a live audition, because they're scared of not being picked. It's like all this thing, but that's something you have to get used to, because we're not all alike, we're all different. So every actor has his uniqueness, and you've got to be sure of that. And so one of the things that you can do, and definitely should do, is actors know a lot of actors. You have to have a man and a woman, and maybe even an older and a younger man, an older and a younger woman, and you have to make a deal with them. Whenever you have to do a self-tape and you need a man or a woman, you can call him or her, and vice versa, you'll do it for them. So that's one thing, that there's no more excuse, oh, but I couldn't find anybody who would give me the lines, because that's ridiculous. There's so many actors who then they're afraid to face that, and then they have somebody read the lines, which is ridiculous, because they can't react properly. And the thing about doing a dialogue scene is that you react, that you are, and not pretend to be, right? So that's like one simple thing, but it's important. And I think that can give you security, and that can then, because in the end, the director, if you have 4 actors, if you've gone through 6 rounds or 5 rounds or 4 rounds and the director has 3 people who he now has to decide who's going to get the part, they're different. They're all good, but they're all different, because they're all different humans. And in the end, I think the director's going to decide with which person he has more feeling or affinity. And that's something ultimately personal, because it comes from what, you grew up with.
But then I have a question. Rich, does this work like that in the States? Because I think it works like that in Europe, at least. Victor,
Sometimes.
yeah. And do you think it's the same in the States? Like the director will pick the person he will want to spend the time. If they're all 3 of them very good.
Well, the producer has his say too, right? So.
Yeah, I mean, for the actors who are watching, there are innumerable factors that go into any individual casting choice, and your performance is only one of them. And so there's so many things that are completely out of your control, and certainly out of our control as casting directors. I always try to say to actors, that casting directors don't always get their way. Like I have to fight for people that I believe in, and performances that I think are right. But ultimately, it's not my decision. I always say, if I get to the end of a casting process and there are 2 or 3 or 4 people who would be amazing in the job and who could do it, I'm happy, because then I've done my job and everyone else can decide what's best for his or her vision if it's a film for the director, for example. But yeah, I do. There's so many things about each casting choice that have nothing to do with the actor and his or her performance.
I have a terrible analogy for that, which is, I mean, it is a terrible analogy, but imagine like a war. You have to lose a few battles to win the war. And that's what casting is like. You know, there are, as Rich was saying, there are certain characters, you know, sometimes the director will definitely want this person you think is not necessarily the right person, but you have to let that one go because you want to make sure you get this person the job here. So it's a balance, and you know, it's a lot of people management that goes on within that.
Yeah. Is it a war you win often?
Of course. I have very strong opinions, and people know about them.
Lazy man, in my experience. How about the rest of you? Do you win your wars?
I was just going to say, you know, I really think our job is to find the right actor for the right director and the right producer. Because if a director, there are various, just as there are various actors, there are also various directors. And some directors don't know or had in their training, never had, how do you say, a seminar where they also did acting. So they don't really know, quite a few don't really know about the different methods and this and that, and therefore the joys of, you know, getting stuff out of an actor and so on and so forth. So that's, you know, so I've had that a couple of times with people I was really passionate about. I mean, I'm a former actor, so I'm passionate about also this because I have like memories, right? And when I see that a director just doesn't get it, you know, I mean, I'm not the director, so I have to shut up, right? That's, you know, it's the director. Yeah, it really is. You know, there's no point in forcing a director to choose someone, you know, you can't force them anyway. So, but I think it's an issue, you know?
Oh, it's a total drama for me. I mean, when you know the guy is wrong, and you want to
He's
go,
wrong.
listen to me for fuck's sake. I'm not talking about my job. And no, and
You can't do it.
Oh,
You can't do it. You
it's
have
so frustrating. And the worst is when you go to the screening, you know, like the crew screening, and you go, et voilà, c'est la merde. It doesn't work. I knew it. And then the director comes to you at the end and say, you were right. I don't want to be right afterwards. I want to be right before, you know. Oh, it depresses me so much.
Let's move on to a few specific questions which have come in from our members attending today. One from a graduate, so a British graduate, wondering how they should go about entering the market in your country. So presumably you're not in the UK, but in France, in Italy, in the US. Tips for those guys?
yes.
Well, let's Rich speak maybe for the US.
I mean, I would say it's a UK graduate.
It is, yes. I think we can assume that, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, look, I would say yes, the world is getting smaller. Yes, it is a global marketplace, but there's a lot going on where you live, and start there.
Yeah.
You know, it's if an American production wants you or needs you, then we will find you. We have colleagues all over the world helping us on larger productions. But you know, be happy, be grateful, be satisfied that you're graduating in the UK, because there's a lot getting made there.
Yeah, that sounds very true. How about Italy, Beatrice?
Okay, I would say that for Italy, but for every country really, I think that as an actor, since, you know, today, if you need to buy something, you can order everything on the internet and get everything through the internet. Well, if you're looking for actors, you can go on the internet. You can also find actors on the internet. And I think, I mean, I use a lot casting sites because I'm curious to see, you know, what there is. And I think that as an actor, you should take the time and sit down and really fill in your profile in every single detail, because on Spotlight, on Italenta, on, you know, you have all these possibilities, and really sit down and think, okay, what can I do and how well can I do it? Every single ability, every single sport, every single God knows what. because it might take half a day or even 2 days or even a week maybe. But then when you've done that, your profile can work for you, because very many casting directors use platforms, maybe not to send out breakdowns too many, because then, you know, not many do that, but to search actors. And the thing is, if their profile is not complete or detailed, then those details can't show up in searches. And that way, if they come up, you know, then someone can be discovered for the first time, seen, you know. And therefore, I mean, I've met a lot of actors like that too.
Yeah, that
I
sounds
think
very
it's really,
wise.
really important. And it's something that the actor can do, and the agent cannot do that.
Yeah,
The
a
agent can't do that.
full profile. How about show reels and voice reels too? Are they an important part of discovery?
Yes, you need to know. Photos, I don't believe much in photos, but what you need to know of an actor is you need to see him move and hear his voice when he speaks. So definitely.
Yeah, and if I can make a suggestion, when I recently used eTalenta, you can be proud of me, because I was looking for a German actor who could speak French, good French. And the problem is actors are not always aware. Well, that's true for the French, definitely. They all think they're totally bilingual, and this is lying. These are lies. But I mean, at least they're pretty honest with it, because they really believe in it. So German actors are more strict, you know, square. So, but then still, it's a difference between communicating in another language and then acting in a language. And then I think that if you speak other languages, that maybe you could do a little me video with the language that you think you speak fluently, or the language you do speak fluently, so that we have an idea of your level of skill with the language. Because among all these people, some of them, they didn't have the level to act in French.
Yeah.
That's, you know, don't try to, come on, overrate yourself. But it's not, sometimes it's not that they want to lie, it's just that they don't realize that they won't be free enough to act in another language. So maybe a little video, or maybe just the sound, you know, just a voice thing
to be able to see them.
with the language, that would be helpful for us.
Victor, for you too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the work that we've done in the last few years. We have a lot of international talent come into the shows, and that's been a mixture of us searching the UK for it, but also searching in specific countries, and also using other casting directors in other countries to help us with those searches. But in terms of trying to find a market outside of your own country, as Rich said, do the graft in your own country first, because there's so much going on. Within each country, that you need to kind of understand who you are as an actor and work out that bit first before you start trying other countries. Because as everyone said, everyone has their own actors. Why would you have a 22-year-old person from the UK who happens to speak French when you've got a French actor who's 22 who can do the job perfectly well? Unless you need someone who is English who haven't speak French. You know, if that's the role requirement, then of course.
Or a French actor who can speak French even with a slight accent, because the character is English, or originally from, or something like that. Which is it's okay. But otherwise, you're right, Rich. I mean, do your own job in your own country, and, you know, get visibility in your country, and then you will probably.
Back to what we were saying. Sorry, go ahead.
Just quick, I think that apart from America and England, where it's always the English language, and where definitely there's most work, much more than anywhere else, I think that every other actor from another country should, if he wants to work outside of his or her country, should definitely learn English, and should always continue to improve it. Because the thing is, we all have an accent, and depending on what kind of a project it is and what kind of a role it is, the entity, people get bored listening to accents that are strong. So learn, the more fluid and perfect you speak English, the greater roles you can get. The more the possibility to get bigger roles. So if you're really interested, then you have to study.
Good advice. I mean, a question that follows on from that quite neatly is we were asked, is there a way that casting directors in different countries like to be contacted? Does that way vary between country? So does anyone want to answer that one? I mean, how do you like to be contacted by actors?
I think it varies by casting director.
Mm.
Right.
If you ask 20 casting directors that question, you're going to get 20 different answers, unfortunately, for the actors that are watching.
Well, I just have one way.
Go on, what's yours, Lou?
I want to have just a short thing. Hello, I'd like to meet you or whatever. Here is the link to my profile.
Mhm.
You know, because I hate it. We all get, I imagine, zillions of emails, 40 megabyte photos and this and that, you know, and so what are you going to do? I work with Spotlight and eTalenta, and you know, where I can make my notes, and that's my archive online. Those are my archives online. But what am I going to do? I have to download. I have to read all of that. Then I have to download it all. Then if I'm not looking for someone specifically similar, like that person, that moment, it's a waste of time.
Yeah, and I guess
Sorry
that
for the actors.
if, as you were saying just now, if your profile is complete and it describes you fully and completely, then a link through to it kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it?
It's professional, it's easy, it's quick, and you can make, because I look at them and then I say, oh, to keep in mind, or this is interesting, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all.
Another matter, a very practical matter. One of our members asks us, how easy is it for an actor to be cast for a non-UK production without having the correct working visa in place? Will the production sort this out if the person is cast? Maybe that's probably a question best directed towards you, Rich.
Sure. I always say there, for any question that anyone asks about Hollywood or entertainment, you can answer in one of two ways. It's either it depends or money. And so, yeah, if you happen to be a non-American actor that an American production wants and desperately wants, they'll find the money. But I do have to say, you know, our immigration is getting more strict, and it's harder to get that O1 visa. My partner is actually on one. He's Canadian, and it's harder to get. And so it's going to get a little more difficult. If people want you, they'll fight for you. But I would go back to, not only is this the best time for productions around the world, I think it's the best time for an appetite globally for things not in your native language. Netflix and Amazon and these internet platforms have opened the world up to Scandinavian series, to Italian series, to Spanish series. Do good work at home where you are, and you will be found.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else with any thoughts on that? Visas.
French won't be found because they don't speak English. Too bad for them.
Another really practical question I had, maybe we can come to either Victor or Beatrice on this one. How can I build relationships with casting directors, as during auditions it's generally a quick hello and goodbye?
I think, as Beatrice said earlier, it's the idea of being small and being polite and being professional. You know, if you see someone a bunch of times, it means that we like you because we're getting you back in the room every time, so that's a good thing. And then if you see someone at the theatre, I mean, the joy of being in London is that there are, I mean, obviously not right now, but a lot of theatre productions going on. I mean, go to theatre all the time, and actors go to shows, we bump into people, and it is a relatively small city in terms of our industry. And I think when you bump into people, it's just have a polite chat, nice. And if there's a natural connection, like any human connection, then you may spend more time chatting to someone. But ultimately, it's professional interaction, and so it's just about, you know, say hello, how are you, but don't force it. Don't force something to happen. Don't feel that by ingratiating yourself towards us that you're going to get a job, because that's not how it works.
Yeah.
I
Does that go for the rest of you guys? B?
I agree with what you say, Victor. And for me, it's also, I give the lines. So in fact, when I started casting, I'd never looked at the monitor because I was used from theater, you know, and I felt then if it's real or not real. And then I realized I have to look at the monitor because people are not always what they look like, you know, in real life. So, and that makes it personal. If you give the lines, that makes it already, you know, kind of personal. And, but that, yeah, that's a moment, it's human exchange.
But I think there are as many ways of doing it as many casting directors. Like, remember
I'm
that
sure.
you do panels in Lisbon or in Kilkenny or where, or I remember once where we were like 15 on stage, and the one question in the public was, do you answer all the mails you receive? And I was at the end of the line, and then this, you know, Priscilla, Leo, Debbie, Lissy, everybody started.
You'll know Debbie's answer to
no, no, no. And then I was like, well, I'm sorry, I do. And they all went, ah, ha, ha, ha. I really do. Even if it's a word, it's like, but I really try at least to answer every. Sometimes it's hard, but you know. So
Yeah.
it's different for everybody. We all have different methods where, you know, I don't read the lines. I'm not an actress. I've never been an actress. I suck as an actress. So I don't want to read with the actors. I always have an actor to read the lines with me. And so, you know,
Yeah, of course.
So you should figure out, I guess, when you try to reach with a casting director, when you don't know him or her, I think you should try to find out who they are. I mean, first of all, I mean, watch their resume, definitely, and see with what kind of movies they do. Do they do big things, blockbusters, or small movie, like French author films, or big films, or TV? You know, find out who the kind of, well, I can speak for France, because I guess your industry, Victor and Rich, are so much bigger. As in France, I think you can really figure out when you see the resume of a casting director, if he does smaller films or bigger films, and what kind of family of actors they like. You can see that on the credits, you know, see the, so, and you can find interviews of most of the casting directors, so you have a feeling of what their personality is. And some people, I mean, you know, you just don't fuck around with Debbie McWilliams.
No.
I love Debbie. She's a good friend, but I mean, I was scared at first, you know, when I met her. So you just don't ring at her door. I mean, I had people ring at my door a few years back. They don't do it now anymore. They know I can just go punch their face. But in my home door, I mean.
And Rich, anything to add to that from your perspective?
I mean, I think the one thing for actors to keep in mind is that, you know, our job is to cast, and it seems very self-explanatory, but we want the best actor for the role. And so, to Beatrice's earlier point, you know, keep your profiles up to date, use the platforms, because if you send me a link and maybe you're not right for what I'm currently working on, if I think you're interesting, I have my own system for remembering who you are, because I will need someone like you down the road. And so, you know, it's our job we want the best person. We're not against actors, that we're on the same team, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, you know, if you send me material and you're not right for one thing, but you're trained well and you have a great reel and you're interesting, or a type or whatever, I'm not going to forget you.
Yeah, you know, it's 30%, I figured out once, 30% of the self-tapes that I got and that I liked, 30% of them worked with me sooner or later on another movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's why a self-edition is never a lost case. It's always an investment for the future. And I've had directors who also say that, who remembered seeing self-tapes from, you know, for other projects in the past. So it works, you know, self-tape is important.
That's a really interesting point. Does that go for the rest of you guys? Do you ever cast actors in a different project from a self-tape you?
Always.
Oh yeah,
Always, and
all
also
the time.
from theatre as well. You know, there are shows I've seen, or actors have seen sort of 10 years ago, that I've always thought were very good, and they've had the right chance to get them in something. Eventually, you find something, and there's and 10 years online, happens because I remember who they are. And then from self-tapes and from even just other auditions, I mean, self-tapes where you've met someone and go, you know what, I really like you, you're a good actor. It hasn't worked for this one, but I like something else. And I think it's my pinned thing on my Twitter feed is there's nothing more exciting for us as casting directors to be able to offer someone a job who you've seen many, many times, but it just never quite worked out up until that point. And that's really exciting for us to finally say, to ring the agent and go, they've got the job.
Yeah, it is so exciting.
That's really good to hear. And you touched on another point about agents, which I wanted to come on to. Where you guys operate, do the actors who you cast and who you see generally all have agents? What's the importance of having either a local agent or an agent in your home country for the projects which you guys cast? Natalie?
Well, I mean, we all know that not everyone can have an agent. So we work with actors who don't have agents, and it's okay. I mean, it's not like you got the plague. We will deal with it. It's just that people who don't have an agent complain that they're not aware of what we're doing, for instance. But we don't advertise what we're doing, as a matter of fact. I mean, we're 71 members at ARDA, plus the ones who are not with us at the association. Except for commercials or really specific researches, which are really bizarre, you know, but we don't advertise. We go through our files, our data, of course, agents, and also our Facebook pages. We go, but you know, if we're looking for 25, 30 years old girl or boy for a part, an important part, we won't advertise for it because we have so many to deal with that we don't need to advertise for it. But does this answer your question, or?
It does. No, it does. Absolutely. I mean, Rich, on a market that operates at the scale of the US, is it the same for you? How many of the performers who you see make it to actually get a face-to-face with you without having an agent?
I mean, it's going to depend, like I said, it'll depend on the size of the project. I think for me, casting always expands to the time that you give it. And so if I need someone tomorrow, I will call the agents that I know and trust and who's available and who can take the job. If I have 6 months or a year or 4 months or whatever, I'll read as many people as I'm able because that's my job. I like meeting new people. And so yeah, it'll depend on the project. If you're doing a very, very high profile project, it's unlikely, if you're not a completely unique type, that unrepresented actors will be seen. But if you're doing a smaller project or you're doing commercials or things like that, absolutely. It's going to depend on the project.
Yeah.
But if you're an actor who's doing good work, an agent or a manager will find you.
I want to say something to that too, if I may. I work a lot with Russian, Ukraine, Polish, Slovenian, you know, lots of Eastern European countries also. And Eastern European countries, they never have agents. I mean, now they have 1 or 2, but it was because agent is a typical capitalistic job, right? So in the communist times, it was the Arbeitsbüro, the work bureau that took care of the actors, you know. I mean, there was never a need for an agent. Now, of course there is, but there's still very, very many incredibly well-educated actors, well-trained actors, because they come from really hot ground of you know, all their theater history and all that. But they don't have agents. And so I think platforms, I mean, that's why Talent is also in Russian, because, you know, that helps, and it does. And that's I've met so many actors in those countries and through the internet, through, you know, this casting platform, who are excellent, excellent, really, really excellent. So I think that's why I'm, you know, for me it's completely the same, agent or without agent.
Good to hear. And Victor, how about you from the UK perspective?
I think it's because, as Natalie said earlier, it's such a big market here that there is, it's harder if you don't have an agent. It is, because you don't necessarily get access. And as Rich said, it depends on your timescale. If you need something tomorrow or in 2 days' time, then you go through Spotlight because it's a system you know. Whereas if you've got more time, then you can do more public searches. You can do Twitter feeds. You can do advertising to find people. But in the UK, I think agents are the norm, and it's and so absolutely in Eastern Europe and Russia, it is about actors just representing themselves and who they know, and Facebook is used quite a lot in those countries, but not in the UK.
Yeah. And so there's a specific question here. Somebody who has an agent in Europe, but not one in the UK or the US. Would you recommend that that performer contacts UK casting directors directly, or ask the agent in their home country to contact casting directors for them? So how
I'd say there's a 99.9% chance of that agency will have a Spotlight account, so they'll get access to anything that comes over here, or comes from here. So it's for theatre stuff and for relationships, it'd be good to have a UK agent, but you don't necessarily have to. We deal with European agents all the time. So it's, we always find it quite odd when someone's British and they don't have a British rep. It's just weird. Like there's a handful of people that go to America very early on and sort of they come back over here 10 years later and they've done all these shows that we've never got, and there's this weird kind of thing where they're kind of famous over there, but then no one really knows who the feck they are over here, and this is kind of weird kind of relationship that goes on. But in terms of the European agent, we do speak to them and they will have access to things that are going on, but probably not as much access as someone over here, and sometimes more, because there are some people who do still use their own lists and lists of agents. I mean, personally, everything goes out to everyone. I think it's silly not to, but there are people who still like to stick with their little patterns.
Yeah. Let me ask a specific questions about the US. So for you, Rich, is it still worth going to pilot season in LA if you don't have an agent? I guess more broadly, what is the situation with pilot season these days?
I don't know that there will ever be one again. It's worldwide and it's year-long production. I don't know that there will be the way we had thought of the first couple of months of the year being when the pilots are made. That's just not true anymore. In terms of, I would say, non-Americans and Americans without agents, yes, it's getting harder, but ultimately, if you are a unique type and if you are doing good work, a casting director will find you, an agent will find you, a manager will find you. But when you're talking submissions for network pilots, we're talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,000 per role. The idea, and they're the people with agents, and so it's not mathematically possible to see everyone.
Yeah, wow, those numbers are enormous, aren't they? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, my friend Jason Kennedy, who's on the board of CSA with me, did an open call. He's the casting director for NCIS and all of those on CBS. And for this time where we're all staying at home, he did a video open call. I think at last count, they had 63,000 submissions.
Oh my God, what a nightmare. What do you do with that? You just go crazy.
But he and his office are going through them slowly and finding people. And, he needs dramas like that are like casting a feature film every 12 to 15 days. Yeah. He's got casts of 20 to 60 for each episode. He hires a huge volume of actors. And so, but
this is the difference. Yeah.
Those numbers were staggering to me. It was like 63,000 at last count.
That's incredible.
So Natalie's quite right. Like the numbers are much higher here. But if you're doing good work, an agent or manager will find you. And if you are a unique type of person, of performer, and doing good work, we will find you as casting directors.
Yeah, good to hear. Do you guys have open calls in the UK and in the European countries?
It happens, yeah, absolutely. It does happen. I think it takes a lot of organisation, but but yes, especially if you're finding someone either in from a minority group or younger, kids, because that is a needle in a haystack, finding children. Yeah, it does happen, but you need a lot of lead-in time. That requires you to be employed quite early on to be able to facilitate that.
But when you say open call, it means that you advertise for your research, and then anyone can show up at any time, right? Yeah. Okay, so because here when we do children casting or teenager casting, well, we have some specialized young casting directors who do that really greatly. So I will leave that to them. Yeah, exactly. But they will advertise, but then they will deal with the submissions and then call them in. And so we don't really do open calls. We don't do open calls at all, I think.
Beatrice?
I've done a couple, but it's actually a long time ago. It's like 15 years ago, 20 years of children. And great experience. Once it was 6,000. That was a long thing to go through. But it's with the in this case with the schools. They have not. There's lots of rules, so you have to know long beforehand. And today, I think you really, like you said, it needs to be organized in time. And but it depends on the role, because we've cast in nightclubs. For small roles, we needed people. They still had lines, and they were weird. So we've done that too.
Look, we are rapidly running out of time, but let me just ask you one final question, just to wrap things up. So I'd like to ask your advice for anyone that wants to find out more. So Spotlight members who want to find out more about performing, acting in your countries, in your industries, what would you recommend that they do from today? Where do they go from here? Rich?
First. Actually, I've been thinking about this a lot, and my answer to actors here or actors globally would be, take out your search engine and do some searching. There are podcasts and webinars and amazing members of worldwide casting organizations reaching out to actors and doing, interviewing each other, interviewing actors. You can learn a lot from listening to casting directors talk about their craft. And there's, I couldn't even name them. There's so many different platforms of things like this, for example, where you hear something you never thought of. You look at something a different way. The internet has a lot of pitfalls, but it is helping us in terms of communication globally.
Yeah, good advice. Beatrice, what would you say?
Same, because there's so many people. And we had, for instance, a Greek colleague, actually a Greek agent, who decided to come to Italy and present her actors, and invited then some of us casting directors to Athens, and really had all of her actors meet them. We did auditions with them, and she facilitated. She was a facilitator, so that was a good thing. But I'm sure that you can also do that in Italy, because people like to come to Italy also. I mean, I don't know at the moment, but once they open the borders, I think they will probably sooner or later come again. And therefore, well, in Italy they like people anyway. They like to talk, and and it's always good. It's always, I think it's
good to hear. Victor, tell us, researching the UK market and working in the UK.
I think exactly the same as Rich, as both of them were saying, because it's about, there's so much stuff online now. Like what Spotlight offers is great. There's so many conversations and webinars online, historical ones online, conversations. Another one that I do with you guys in Stockholm is online somewhere if you want to find it. It's no dime bars are seen in this production though. But there's a lot of stuff and information on the internet that you can do your research. You can do your research about individual casting directors. You can do your research into actor, you can do your own research into finding out what kind of actor you want to be by watching other projects, by watching TV, by watching film, by watching theatre. It's always about, it's a constant learning thing. I think the good thing about acting is that it's something that will be there forever and can constantly change. It's an ever-evolving thing.
Yeah, understood. And Natalie, anything to add?
The thing is, maybe I didn't get the question right, because the question was, how can actors from other countries?
It's about finding out more about actors that want to work in France.
Well, but the thing is, you don't want to work in France until you speak totally French, because when I work on international projects, if I work for foreign casting directors, friends of mine who ask me for a job, it's because they searching for a French character. So I know my market, so I will send them. Otherwise, maybe there will be one character once in a while who is Danish or Spanish, and it doesn't matter if he has an accent or not, but it happens. Then you have to be totally fluent in French. You might have an accent today, doesn't matter so much as before, because the world is so much smaller now.
It sounds like having an up-to-date profile that has all of your
yeah, and I totally agree with I think it's Rich who said that do your work in your own country, but we will find you, definitely. I think that's the base. Yeah.
Sounds very wise. Thank you so much. Look, thank you very much to all of you, to Natalie, Vic, Beatrice and Rich. We're really grateful that you shared your knowledge and insight, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks to everyone who's participated and attended today. Thanks for your questions. We're sorry we haven't been able to get to all of them, but I hope you found this session useful. You can look out for more Spotlight webinars, which will be announced very soon. Thanks to the panelists and thanks to you all. Goodbye.